I walked into my son's high school graduation clutching a cheap bouquet of grocery store tulips. My ex-husband's wealthy new wife looked me up and down from the front row and sneered. "This seat is reserved for the real family. Go stand in the back." So I did. I stood silently in the back of the room. But she had absolutely no idea that when my son took the podium as the class valedictorian 10 minutes later, he was going to humiliate her so severely that the school principal would publicly evict her from the building. Before we dive into this incredibly satisfying nuclear revenge, do me a massive favor. Hit that subscribe button and welcome to Peegyn. Drop a comment right now telling me what city or country you're watching from. We upload the most insane Reddit stories every single day. Now, let's get into the drama. The bright yellow tulips were still slightly damp from the grocery store cooler. I know that is a strangely specific detail to focus on, but that is the funny thing about the moments that fundamentally break your heart. You never remember the massive, sweeping details first. You remember the freezing condensation on your fingertips. You remember the loud, crinkling sound a plastic wrapper makes when your hands are shaking too hard. You remember peeling off the $8.99 price tag in the humid high school parking lot because you were desperately terrified that your son would see it and know you were struggling. I had been standing outside the heavy wooden doors of the Valley Ridge High School Auditorium for exactly 7 minutes. I checked my worn-out watch 3 times. I wanted to time my entrance perfectly. I didn't want to arrive too early and look desperate, but I absolutely couldn't be late. I just wanted to slip inside, find my designated chair, and finally take a breath. It was the specific seat my son, Leo, had personally reserved for me. His text message was still glowing on my phone screen. "Mom. Front row, center aisle, seat 3A. I literally taped your name to the back of the chair myself. I want the absolute first face I see when I walk through those double doors to be yours. Please be there." I had reread that text message 15 times since Tuesday. I was wearing a simple, tailored navy blue dress. I bought it at a local thrift store for $25, and I had dry cleaned it twice just to make sure it looked immaculate. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning in my cramped one-bedroom apartment, the one with the crooked plumbing and the radiator that screamed all winter, just to perfectly curl my hair. I wanted to look like a woman who had finally made it to the finish line, because I had. We both had. I took a deep breath, pushed open the heavy auditorium doors, and walked straight into the single worst moment of my entire adult life. To understand why this moment almost destroyed me, I need to back up. Because if I just start with Victoria, my ex-husband's new wife, standing in the aisle in her designer silk blouse and her diamond earrings, blocking my path, you won't understand the history. My ex-husband, Marcus, and I were married for 9 exhausting years. We divorced when Leo was 8 years old. It wasn't a cinematic, screaming divorce. It was quiet, insidious, and honestly 1,000 times worse. Marcus possessed this terrifying psychological gift for making you feel like your genuine pain was just a hysterical overreaction. He made you feel like having basic human needs was a form of toxic greed. When I finally filed the paperwork and requested standard child support, Marcus's high-powered corporate lawyer sent me a terrifying 30-page legal document. It aggressively explained that Marcus's fluctuating real estate income made consistent monthly payments structurally inadvisable. At the time, I was working the brutal lunch shift at a greasy diner off the interstate. Leo was in the 3rd grade, carrying a backpack with a broken zipper that I had desperately duct-taped back together 4 different times. I was 29 years old. I had an 8-year-old boy to feed, 0 college degree, and absolutely no legal budget. Marcus's lawyer wore a custom suit that cost more than my entire car. So I caved. I signed a deeply unfair settlement just to get away from the abuse. I had to completely start over from 0. I started small. I bought a rusted-out, used food cart from an older gentleman who was retiring. I had watched my grandmother cook traditional Mexican food my entire childhood, and her breakfast burritos were legendary in our neighborhood. I dragged that heavy metal cart to the sidewalk directly outside the Valley General Hospital at 5 a.m. every single weekday. Hospital nurses and exhausted doctors start their shifts early, and they're incredibly grateful for hot food. For 4 agonizing years, I woke up at 3:30 a.m. every single morning. My hands are covered in tiny, faded white burn scars for where the commercial steam blasts you when you're moving too fast in the freezing winter air, trying to serve 15 doctors at once. I used to be deeply ashamed of my scarred hands. I hid them in my pockets. Today, I look at them as battle armor. Leo grew up watching me bleed for every single dollar. He did his middle school homework on a cheap folding table sitting right next to my food cart during his summer vacations. He learned how to calculate sales tax in his head before he learned long division. Meanwhile, Marcus had seamlessly upgraded his life. He married Victoria. Victoria was the wealthy daughter of a massive commercial real estate developer. She was a woman who wore expensive white linen in the middle of autumn and made it look effortless. She had 2 teenage daughters from a previous marriage who looked right through me like I was a pane of dirty glass whenever we did custody drop-offs. Marcus officially moved into Victoria's sprawling estate in the gated Silver Lake neighborhood. It had a tennis court and a heated saltwater pool. Leo was legally required to spend every other weekend there. He never once complained to me about it, but a mother knows her son. When Leo turned 16, he came home from Marcus's house looking incredibly tense. He quietly told me that Victoria had cornered him in the kitchen and strongly suggested he look into community college, because aiming for a top-tier university just wasn't a realistic path for a boy with his background. I saw my son's jaw visibly tighten. It was a specific tic he developed when he was suppressing his anger. "What do you think about that?" I had asked him. "I think," Leo whispered, his eyes burning with quiet fury, "that I'm going to make her choke on those words." And he did. Leo graduated first in his entire class with a 4.2 GPA. He secured a full-ride academic scholarship to Stanford University's aerospace engineering program. My kid, the exact same kid I used to carry on my back through freezing blizzards because the city buses stopped running at 9 p.m. and he refused to leave the public library until his science project was flawless. If you respect single mothers who hustle and sacrifice everything for their kids, smash the like button right now to show some love for Elena. Let's get back to the graduation. The Valley Ridge High School Auditorium was a gorgeous, newly renovated facility that held about 800 people. I walked through the doors at 9:45 a.m. The room was buzzing with excited families and flashing cameras. I held my grocery store tulips tightly against my chest and began walking down the center aisle, looking for row 1, seat 3A. I spotted the VIP reserved section instantly. I saw the thick, white cardstock names elegantly draped over the chairs. And then I saw Victoria. Victoria was sitting directly in seat 3A. She was wearing a stunning, cream-colored designer dress, leaning sideways, laughing loudly at something the woman next to her had said. Her 2 wealthy daughters were sitting next to her, completely absorbed in their iPhones. Marcus was sitting 1 seat over in 3B. I stopped dead in my tracks. The seat with my actual name on it was occupied by the woman who told my son he would never amount to anything. I walked to the very edge of the row and stood there in silence. Victoria finished her obnoxious laugh, tossed her highlighted hair over her shoulder, and slowly turned to look at me. She looked me up and down twice. It was the exact look you give a stray dog that wanders into an expensive restaurant. "Can I help you?" Victoria asked, her voice dripping with venom. "That is my seat," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I had years of practice keeping my voice level around these people. "Seat 3A. My son personally reserved it. My name is on the back of the chair." Victoria casually glanced over her shoulder at the seat back. My name was indeed there. Elena Vance. But the thick white card had been violently bent at the corner and slightly ripped, as if someone had aggressively tried to tear it off the fabric and gave up halfway through. "Oh," Victoria smirked, turning back to face the stage. "Listen, ma'am, these front row seats are reserved for real families. You can go stand in the back. You should get used to it." I physically felt those words enter my chest. I felt them hit the exact spot in my rib cage where deep, suffocating humiliation lives right before it metamorphoses into blinding rage. "I am his mother," I whispered. "And Marcus is his father," Victoria snapped, finally glaring at me. And this is our family's designated section. Leo is sweet, but he is just a naive teenager. Marcus arranged this seating chart. These are the people who actually matter today. Marcus was sitting less than 3 feet away from me. He was staring blankly at the empty wooden stage. He was employing the focused, cowardly attention of a weak man who has firmly decided that if he completely ignores a conflict, it technically isn't happening. Suddenly, a young student usher in a burgundy vest appeared at my elbow. He looked incredibly nervous. "Ma'am, is there an issue here?" The usher stammered. "Could you please clear the center aisle? The procession is about to start." I looked down at the $8 tulips trembling in my scarred hands. I thought about Leo pacing nervously behind the stage curtains, practicing his valedictory speech. This was the biggest day of his entire life. I was not going to give Victoria the sick satisfaction of causing a screaming scene and ruining my son's moment. I didn't say a single word. I turned around and took the long, humiliating walk to the absolute back of the auditorium. The back of the auditorium was an entirely different universe. I found a small patch of empty, standing room right next to the heavy metal exit doors. There were 2 massive industrial cooling fans loudly humming next to me to compensate for the broken air conditioning. The audio from the PA system echoed terribly back there. I leaned against the cold cinder block wall, pressed the crushed tulips against my chest, and desperately told myself it was fine. It was not fine. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Standing in the shadows at the absolute back of your only son's high school graduation, listening to loud fans, while your ex-husband's arrogant wife sits in the front row seat your son built for you, is a very specific, excruciating brand of psychological torture. I almost texted Leo to warn him, but I knew the faculty made the students turn their phones off before the procession. And honestly, what would I even say? "Hey honey, your stepmom evicted me, but don't worry about me, have a great speech." I was saved from my own spiraling thoughts by the sudden, booming chords of pomp and circumstance echoing through the speakers. The heavy side doors swung open, and the graduating class began filing in. They marched in alphabetical pairs. I found myself automatically doing frantic mental math. Vance. V comes late. And then I saw him. Leo walked through those doors wearing a pristine, dark green graduation gown. A heavy gold honor cord was draped around his neck, and a massive gold medal representing the Academic Excellence Award was swinging proudly at his chest. He had inherited his father's tall height, but he had inherited my unbreakable, stubborn spine. As soon as he hit the center aisle, Leo's eyes instantly shot to the front row. Marcus enthusiastically raised his hand, waving like a politician greeting his adoring fans. Victoria plastered on a blinding, camera-ready smile. Leo's expression did not change. His eyes just kept rapidly scanning. Left, right, scanning the second row, scanning the third. I watched his face from 100 feet away with the microscopic precision of a mother who has studied those exact features since the day he was born. And from across the massive room, I saw the exact devastating millisecond he realized I wasn't sitting in seat 3A. His jaw violently locked. He took one sharp, heavy breath through his nose. And then he just kept marching. He kept moving with the procession because he had to, and I kept standing in the shadows because I had to, and we both pretended everything was fine from opposite ends of a crowded room. I need to pause the graduation for 1 second to explain something vital about Leo's relationship with his father. When Leo was 10 years old, Marcus promised to attend his birthday party at a local municipal park. I had baked a cheap chocolate cake from scratch. Leo had talked about his dad coming for 3 straight weeks. Marcus never showed up. He sent a $20 Amazon gift card via email. Leo was terrifyingly quiet that entire afternoon. He ate his cake. He played on the swings. He didn't shed a single tear, which honestly made it hurt infinitely worse. When the party ended and I was throwing away the paper plates, my 10-year-old son walked up to me and delivered a sentence that shattered my soul. "He wasn't going to come anyway, Mom," Leo said, completely devoid of emotion. "I already knew that." "How did you know that, honey?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Because," Leo replied, looking down at his shoes. When he promised me on the phone, I could hear him typing on his keyboard. People who actually mean what they say don't multitask when they make promises. He was 10 years old. I locked myself in the bathroom that night and sobbed on the bath mat for an hour. Not because Marcus was a deadbeat, but because my tiny son had already developed psychological armor to protect himself from his own father's apathy. The graduation ceremony droned on. Principal Hayes gave a long, boring opening remark. The school board president rambled about the infinite possibilities of the future. The massive fans next to me kept humming. Finally, Principal Hayes stepped back up to the microphone. "It is my profound honor," the principal announced, his voice echoing through the hall, "to introduce this year's class valedictorian, a young man who arrived at this school as a quiet freshman and leaves us today as a legend. Please welcome Leo Vance." The auditorium absolutely exploded. Marcus literally leaped out of his front row seat, puffing his chest out like he had just won a Nobel Prize. Victoria instantly whipped out her iPhone and started recording the moment for her Instagram followers. Leo walked calmly up the wooden steps to the podium. He was perfectly composed. He always looked calm. It was the exact trait that made arrogant people constantly underestimate him. Leo reached into the folds of his green gown and pulled out a crisp, folded sheet of paper. His speech. He showed me the rough draft 2 weeks ago. It was a beautiful, safe, measured speech about community, ambition, and thanking the faculty. It was designed to please everyone. Leo stared at the paper for a long, heavy 5 seconds. And then he slowly folded the paper back up in half. He tucked it back inside his gown. He gripped the edges of the wooden podium with both hands and leaned into the microphone. "I had a speech prepared today about the meaning of success." Leo's voice boomed through the speakers. "But I saw something exactly 20 minutes ago that completely changed my mind." The massive room instantly quieted down. The applause died entirely. "My mother," Leo said, his voice ringing like a bell, "is currently standing in the shadows at the absolute back of this auditorium." Every single head in the room violently turned. 800 pairs of eyes swiveled toward the rear wall, toward the exit doors, toward the loud fans, and locked directly onto me. A tired woman in a thrift store dress clutching $8 tulips. "She is not standing back there because she was late," Leo continued, his voice echoing in the dead silence. "She is not standing back there because she forgot. She's standing by the exit doors because someone in the front row maliciously ripped her name off the VIP seat I built for her. I saved that specific chair because I wanted the absolute first face I saw today to be hers." The whispers ignited immediately. It was like a tidal wave of gossip rolling from the front rows to the back. Victoria's iPhone slowly dropped to her lap. Marcus's face morphed through 4 different shades of panic in 10 seconds. He went pale, then pink, and finally a raw, mortified, sweating crimson. "Success is a deeply complicated word," Leo continued, completely ignoring the whispering crowd. "We talk about success like it is a shiny medal, or a high GPA, or a massive mansion in a gated community in Silver Lake." Leo paused, letting the insult hang in the air. "But that is not what I think about when I look at my life. When I think of success, I think about a woman waking up at 3:30 in the morning, every single morning, to stand outside a freezing hospital and steam burritos until her hand recovered in 3rd-degree burns. She did it so her kid could afford advanced calculus textbooks. She bled so her kid could afford the insane application fees for universities that absolutely do not care how early your mother wakes up, only how high your test scores are." I could hear mothers in the audience openly crying. I was physically shaking. I only realized it because I could hear the plastic wrapper of the tulips aggressively crinkling against my chest. When I was 12 years old, Leo's voice dropped an octave. I shattered my arm in 3 places. It required emergency orthopedic surgery. My mother was told it would cost $4,000 out of pocket before the cheap insurance kicked in. She frantically called my father. The room was so suffocatingly silent, you could hear a pin drop. My father told her he couldn't afford it, Leo said coldly. So, my mother drove to a pawn shop on 4th Street that same afternoon. She took off her grandmother's diamond wedding band, the only piece of jewelry she owned in the world, and sold it for $1,200 cash. She took out a predatory payday loan at 24% interest to cover the rest. She paid the surgeon by 5 p.m. Leo turned his head slowly and glared directly down at Marcus in the front row. My father, Leo sneered into the microphone, posted luxury vacation photos from a ski resort in Aspen exactly 4 days later. The silence was absolutely crushing. It felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. I watched Marcus physically shrink into his chair. He wasn't looking at the stage anymore. He was staring a hole into his expensive Italian leather shoes. I'm not telling you all of this to embarrass anyone. Leo paused. Well, actually, maybe a little. A chaotic, nervous ripple of laughter broke out in the back rows. I'm telling you this because society aggressively lies to us about what success actually costs. We show people the shiny gold medals. We never show them the burnt hands. We brag about the Ivy League scholarships. We aggressively hide the pawn shop receipts. Suddenly, Victoria violently stood up. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't politely ask to speak. She just stood up in the dead center of the front row, interrupting a high school graduation, and yelled in a carrying, shrill voice. This is a manipulative attack. Victoria shrieked. His mother absolutely loves playing the pathetic victim. She has been poisoning this boy against our family for years. 800 people gasped in horror. I watched it happen from the back of the room like I was watching a horrific car crash in slow motion. Leo didn't even flinch. He just stared down at her with absolute disgust. Victims suffer in silence, Leo said directly into the microphone. My mother never stopped fighting. She just refused to fight dirty. Principal Hayes was already moving. He marched down the wooden stage stairs with the terrifying, deliberate calm of a man who has managed chaotic parents, volatile teenagers, and school board politics for 25 years and had officially run out of patience. The principal stopped directly in front of Victoria in the front row. His voice did not require a microphone. Ma'am, Principal Hayes commanded. I didn't do anything wrong. Victoria yelled, pointing a manicured finger at the stage. This is an unprovoked attack on our reputation. I demand. You removed a mother's name from her son's graduation seat. Principal Hayes interrupted, his voice cutting through the air like shattered glass. In my building, at my ceremony, you will pack your belongings and you will leave my auditorium. Right now, I absolutely will not. Now, the entire room watched in stunned silence. Victoria's jaw clenched. The expensive, meticulously maintained face of a woman who had never suffered a public consequence in her entire adult life completely short-circuited. She aggressively grabbed her designer purse. Her two daughters scrambled to their feet, their faces burning red with absolute humiliation. The three of them did the walk of shame up the side aisle and out the doors. Marcus did not move an inch. He didn't follow his furious wife. He didn't stand up to defend her honor. He just sat frozen in seat 3B, pale and sweating, with the devastating expression of a coward who realizes the water is finally rising above his chin, and he doesn't know how to swim. Principal Hayes turned around and looked directly at the back of the auditorium. He locked eyes with me, and he gave me a slow, respectful nod. I have walked down a lot of deeply painful aisles in my lifetime. I walked down a church aisle toward Marcus when I was 25, naively believing in a future I would spend the next decade violently unlearning. I have walked down sterile hospital corridors with a pawn shop receipt in my pocket and terror in my throat. But this walk was different. I stepped away from the cinderblock wall. I began walking down the massive center aisle toward the stage. Every single step I took felt like a suffocating layer of trauma was peeling off my skin. The people in the audience were watching me, but they weren't looking at me with the disgust Victoria had used. They were looking at me with profound, overwhelming respect. It was the specific attention a crowd pays to a warrior receiving a crown they watched her bleed for. I reached the absolute front row. The young student usher in the burgundy vest was standing near the seats. He looked incredibly remorseful. He stepped aside and gestured to the chair. I looked down at seat 3A. My name card was still taped to the fabric. Elena Vance. Wrinkled, bent, but entirely unbroken. I sat down. The applause started incredibly slowly. It was an explosive eruption. It built like a massive thunderstorm rolling over a mountain. Heavy, measured, deafening, real. I pressed the cheap grocery store tulips against my chest and looked up at my son standing at the podium. He was watching me. His face, the face that had locked its jaw in pain for so many years, was completely open and glowing with pride. After the graduation ended, when the students were officially released to find their families for photos, Leo didn't linger near the stage. He marched directly toward me. He completely ignored Marcus, who was still pathetically hovering near the front row, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Leo stopped directly in front of me. He took the leather-bound diploma out from under his arm and held it out to me with both hands. "This belongs to you too, Mom," Leo said softly. "No, Leo," I cried, finally letting the tears fall. "You earned this. You did the work. We earned it," he stated firmly. "I just passed the tests. You built the foundation." He looked over his shoulder. Marcus was standing 10 feet away, holding a useless graduation program, looking completely lost. "When I start at Stanford in the fall," Leo said, intentionally raising his voice so it carried across the empty rows, "I'm going to be officially registering under your maiden name, Mom." I gasped. "Leo." I heard Marcus physically step forward. "Leo, please." Marcus's voice trembled. It was that carefully calibrated, manipulative tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while being a monster. Leo slowly turned around to face his father. "I already filed the legal paperwork with the courthouse, Dad," Leo said without a single ounce of heat or anger. It was just a cold, undeniable fact. The judge officially finalized the name, changed this morning at 8 a.m. The Vance bloodline ends with you. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Leo stared at him for a long, heavy moment. This brilliant boy, who had learned at 10 years old that cowards don't look you in the eye when they make promises, just shook his head in pity. Leo turned his back on his father forever, grabbed my shoulder, and smiled. "Come on, Mom," Leo beamed. "Let's go take some photos with those beautiful flowers." If you think Leo is the absolute greatest son of all time, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know how satisfying that ending was. 3 months later, Leo is thriving at Stanford. He calls me every single Sunday to complain about his roommate's terrible taste in music. The morning after the viral graduation speech, my phone blew up with 40 different catering requests from wealthy parents in the audience. My tiny food cart has now officially expanded into a massive, fully staffed catering operation with a customized website and a massive corporate waitlist. Victoria deleted all of her social media out of pure shame, and Marcus is living in the miserable bed he made for himself. My hands are still covered in white burn scars, but I don't hide them anymore. I wear them with absolute pride. Thanks for watching, Peegyn, and I will see you guys in the next video.